I was in seat 2A. On the aisle. First class was full, but quiet. The man in seat 1A got on before me. The name on the seat screen was clear. Ethan Walker. He was over 50. Worn brown leather jacket. Zipped halfway. White t-shirt underneath. Dark jeans. A frayed canvas bag was tucked neatly under the seat in front of him before the flight attendant could even offer to help. He didn't look around, just sat down, buckled his seatbelt, and asked for a glass of plain water. The cabin hummed along like it should. Flight attendants checked the overhead bins. The cabin lights were steady. No one was talking loud. The woman in seat 1B boarded next. Victoria Reynolds. She was around 40, with perfectly styled blonde hair, a light-colored suit, and heels that clicked evenly on the floor. Phone pressed to her ear from the moment she stepped into the cabin. Her voice was loud enough for the front rows to hear about some deal. A meeting. A deadline. She stopped when she saw the seat next to her was taken. Looked at her ticket. Looked back at Ethan Walker. She stood there for a few more seconds, blocking the aisle. The people behind her had to wait. Victoria Reynolds sat down in seat 1B. Didn't look over at him. She put her handbag on the ottoman, pulled a wet wipe from her jacket pocket. She wiped down her own armrest. When she was done, she wiped the shared armrest between their seats. I saw it clearly. The wipe was folded and placed on her tray table. Ethan Walker didn't react. He opened a thin newspaper, folded it once, laid it on his lap, still just drinking his water. Victoria Reynolds looked down at his sleeve, at his old shoes. She leaned toward the flight attendant standing near the galley. Didn't need to raise her voice. Please double-check who is supposed to be sitting in this section. The flight attendant leaned down, checked her handheld device, nodded, kept her voice neutral, said the seating was correct. Victoria Reynolds gave a small smile, without turning back to the attendant. Then your system has a problem. She lifted her foot and nudged Ethan Walker's canvas bag with the toe of her shoe. Not hard, just enough to move it a little. Ethan Walker leaned down, pulled the bag back close to his seat. Didn't say a word. Eyes started to shift around the cabin. The person behind me tilted their head. Someone else looked up at the ceiling. Avoiding looking directly, Victoria Reynolds took out her phone, pointed it towards seat 1A. The sound of a camera shutter clicked once, loud and clear. Ethan Walker looked up, looked at the phone. Then he looked out the window. He put his newspaper down, said nothing. The flight attendant came back, this time with a supervisor. They stood in the aisle in front of row 1, kept their distance. Victoria Reynolds spoke faster now. I don't feel safe sitting next to someone like this. She pointed. Please handle this before the plane starts to taxi. The supervisor asked to see his ticket again. Ethan Walker took the ticket from his jacket pocket, held it out with 2 fingers. The ticket was valid. The name was clear. The seat was correct. Victoria Reynolds crossed her arms. He could be using someone else's ticket. Check his bag. A short silence. No one answered right away. Ethan Walker held the ticket in his hand for another second, then put it away. He placed both hands on his lap, sat up straight. The young flight attendant standing next to me took half a step back. Her eyes looked down at the floor. Victoria Reynolds turned her head toward the back of the cabin. Does anyone here think this is normal? A man in row 3 shrugged. Another person looked down at their phone screen. In row 4, I saw a screen reflected on the partition glass. Someone had started a live stream, not even trying to hide it. The light from the screen flickered slightly. Victoria Reynolds saw it. She adjusted her hair, lifted her chin. Good. At least it's being recorded. Ethan Walker stared straight ahead, at the closed cockpit door. He took a slow breath in, let it out evenly. Victoria Reynolds's voice rang out again. This time, aimed straight down the aisle. "Call security. I want this over with now." The supervising attendant nodded. One of them turned and walked toward the plane's door. The rustling of newspapers in first class stopped. No more clinking of spoons against glasses. Everyone froze. No one was talking. No one got up. Ethan Walker sat still in seat 1A. Victoria Reynolds sat straight up in seat 1B. No one said another word. No one left their seat. I was still in 2A. Didn't move a muscle. The front door of the plane opened. 2 security officers stepped on. Dark uniforms. ID badges on their chests. Hard-soled shoes. They stopped at the front of the cabin. Scanned the area. Then moved down the center aisle. The one in front asked a short question. Who was involved? Victoria Reynolds raised her hand first, without standing up. "It's him." She pointed to seat 1A. "I've made it clear. I don't feel safe." The security officer looked at Ethan Walker, at the canvas bag at his feet, at his jacket. One of them asked to see his ticket. Ethan Walker unbuckled his seatbelt, stood up. Not fast, not slow. He took the ticket from his jacket pocket, held it out, both hands open. Nothing to hide. The officer took the ticket, compared it to his handheld device, handed it back. Seat was right. Name was right. Victoria Reynolds crossed her arms. Then check his bag. One security officer glanced at his partner. Didn't answer right away. The other one moved his hand closer to his belt. Didn't draw anything. Just rested it there. Ethan Walker saw the movement. He paused for half a beat, lowered his hands, placed the ticket on the tray table, stood perfectly still. The young flight attendant near the galley took a step back. Her shoulders slumped. Her eyes were fixed on the floor. The security officer told Ethan Walker to step into the aisle. Ethan Walker did what he was told. He stood between the 2 rows of seats. Back straight, hands at his sides. Victoria Reynolds added, her voice steady but clear. "Check in thoroughly. People like that are good at hiding things." A passenger behind me shifted in their seat. The chair gave a soft creak. Nobody said a word. The security officer bent down and looked at the canvas bag. Didn't touch it right away. He asked if there were any sharp objects or liquids inside. Ethan Walker shook his head. Didn't explain further. The security officer opened the bag. Inside were neatly folded clothes, a small notebook, an empty water bottle. Nothing else. Victoria Reynolds let out a sharp breath. "See, he still shouldn't be here." The security officer zipped the bag shut, put it back where it was. He didn't look at Victoria Reynolds. The officers exchanged a quick glance. One of them told Ethan Walker they needed to verify a few more things. Asked him to take his seat while they waited. Ethan Walker nodded. He sat down in seat 1A, buckled his seatbelt. He placed both hands on his lap. Victoria Reynolds leaned into the aisle. "I don't want to sit next to that man for one more minute." The lead flight attendant stepped forward, kept his distance. He said that everything was being handled. He asked everyone to remain calm. Victoria Reynolds looked around. She saw a few phones held up, not trying to hide it. The screens were bright. She adjusted the collar of her blouse, sat up straight. One of the security officers walked toward the cockpit door, gave it a soft knock, and waited. In the cabin, there was no more chatter. No one pushed a call button. Everyone stayed put. Ethan Walker stared straight ahead. At the closed cockpit door, he took a slow breath in, let it out steady. He didn't look at anyone. The security officer came back, said they needed to consult with the pilots. That's all he said. Victoria Reynolds gave a smug little smile. Finally, someone with some real authority. The cockpit door opened. A man in a pilot's uniform stepped out, 4 stripes on his shoulder. His hat was in his hand. Daniel Moore. He stopped at the head of the cabin, scanned the passengers, didn't say anything at first. Daniel Moore walked slowly down the aisle. He stopped at the first row. He looked at Ethan Walker, at his coat, at his hands, resting on his lap. He glanced over at Victoria Reynolds. Then his eyes went back to Ethan Walker. He didn't ask any questions at first. The security officer gave him a brief explanation. There was a complaint, a request for a search. Everything was on hold. Daniel Moore nodded. His expression gave nothing away. He took another step into the aisle, stood tall. He wasn't far from seat 1A. Victoria Reynolds lifted her chin. "I demand he be removed from this section." Daniel Moore didn't answer her right away. He looked at Ethan Walker again. A longer look this time. Ethan Walker looked up. Their eyes met. No greeting. No nod. In the cabin, nobody moved. No one said another word. I was still in seat 2A. No one changed seats. Daniel Moore stood in the aisle, in front of the first row. He wasn't looking at the ceiling or at the monitors. He looked at Ethan Walker one more time. Longer. This time, Ethan Walker sat perfectly still, both hands on his lap. His jacket wasn't zipped up any higher. The canvas bag was right where they'd left it. Daniel Moore took off his hat. He held it in his left hand. He stood straight-backed. The distance between him and seat 1A hadn't changed. Then he raised his right hand. Straight, sharp, clean. A familiar motion. It needed no explanation. The cabin was silent. No one stood up. Not a single phone made a sound. Daniel Moore held the salute for a beat longer, then lowered it. He said one thing, just loud enough for the first row to hear. "Sergeant First Class, Ethan Walker." Ethan Walker looked up. He looked at Daniel Moore. A flicker of recognition. He gave a very slight nod. Victoria Reynolds shot to her feet. "What is this?" Daniel Moore turned to face her. His voice didn't change. "He's in his correct seat." Victoria Reynolds stepped into the aisle. "I will not accept this. I am a shareholder. I have rights." Daniel Moore held up a hand, stopping her, didn't touch her. "Ma'am, you are interfering with a flight crew." One of the security officers nearby looked at Daniel Moore, waiting for the order. Victoria Reynolds started talking faster. "I am just concerned about safety." Daniel Moore nodded. "Safety has been confirmed." He turned to the security officer, spoke in a low voice. "The inspection is over. No violation. No grounds to proceed." The security officers nodded, stepped back. They turned and headed back toward the front of the plane. Victoria Reynolds looked around, saw phones still held up, saw a few eyes no longer looking away. Daniel Moore continued, "You have 2 choices. Sit in your correct seat and remain quiet, or leave this cabin." Victoria Reynolds stood still for a few seconds. Then she forced a smile. "I will be filing a complaint." Daniel Moore nodded. "You have that right." The supervising flight attendant stepped forward, spoke quietly to Victoria Reynolds about changing seats. It didn't take long. Victoria Reynolds clutched her handbag. She looked at Ethan Walker, said nothing. She turned her back and walked toward the rear of the plane. People made way. No one said anything. She passed through the curtain, disappearing from the first-class cabin. The supervising flight attendant remained in the aisle. She opened her tablet, quickly typed a few lines, didn't read it aloud. A security officer came back, took the tablet, nodded. The name Victoria Reynolds was reconfirmed. The new seat was locked in. No announcements. No arguments. Another flight attendant walked toward the back of the cabin. The first-class curtain didn't open again. Daniel Moore turned back to Ethan Walker. He nodded, didn't say anything more. Then he returned to the cockpit. The cockpit door closed. The cabin returned to its old rhythm. Flight attendants checked seatbelts. The cart rolled quietly. There was no clinking of spoons against glasses. Ethan Walker opened his newspaper, folded it, set it aside. He looked out the window. A flight attendant brought more water, set it down, said nothing. The plane began to taxi. When the plane was at altitude, Daniel Moore came out again. He stood near seat 1A, leaned down and spoke quietly, just loud enough for Ethan Walker to hear. "It's good to see you again." Ethan Walker nodded. "Safe travels." Daniel Moore walked away. For the rest of the flight, there were no more incidents. Ethan Walker slept most of the time. When he was awake, he just drank water and read. Upon landing, passengers stood up row by row. No one pushed. No one spoke loudly. Ethan Walker stood up, grabbed his canvas bag, slung it over his shoulder. He stepped into the aisle. Daniel Moore was standing at the cockpit door. He stood straight, raised his hand in another salute. Didn't hold it long. Ethan Walker paused, nodded, then kept walking. I watched him until he disappeared through the plane's exit. I didn't know who Ethan Walker was before this flight. I also don't know what Victoria Reynolds was thinking when she boarded the plane. I just saw a man sitting in his assigned seat, and a woman who wouldn't accept that. Sometimes, power isn't about who has the louder voice. It's about who follows the rules, and who tries to bend them to their will. I'm not telling this story to take sides. I'm just asking one thing. If you were sitting there, in any seat, what would you see first? The person in front of you, or what you think they represent? If this story made you pause for a second, share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories like this, subscribe to the Black CEO Tales channel.